have charged him in a hacking conspiracy.
Is above the law. Julian Assange is no hero. He is hidden from the truth for
This is key free speech concerns and ought to be a matter of concern for all media organisations and journalists outside of the United States.
Hello, I'm Richard Gisbert, and you're at The Listening Post. Here are some of the media stories that we're covering this week. The case against Julian Assange. Is journalism at risk, or is it just personal? We'll examine the legalities, the politics, the way the story has been reported, and we'll go down under to see how it's been satirized.
I mean, Julian Assange.
Donald Trump and obstruction of justice. The Mueller report, the full version, finally comes out in Washington. And Poland, the Catholic priest whose mini media empire packs a political punch. When the news broke and Julian Assange was forced out of the Ecuadorian embassy in London last week, the debates set off on the airwaves, online, and in print, went to the core of what constitutes journalism. Assange's supporters denounced his arrest, as well as the prospect of his extradition to the United States as an assault on freedom of information, a potential threat for journalists around the world who expose secrets. Others maintain that WikiLeaks traffics in raw data, not news stories, that Assange does not deserve the legal protection real journalists get. In this legal case, the devil is in the details of the indictment. The fact that the U.S. Department of Justice chose not to charge Assange under the Espionage Act, as so many had predicted, but under another statute, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. Look beyond the law, however, and you'll find that there is no escaping the politics of this story and the mainstream media's own role in it. Our starting point this week is London.
Julian Assange's long standoff with international authorities is finally over.
He looks like Rip Van Winkle. He has aged more than 7 years.
This is a story about WikiLeaks, journalism, and the long arm of American justice, reaching all the way into the UK and Ecuador. The issues are complex, and the mainstream media coverage leaned heavily on official talking points.
Why did you revoke the asylum of Julian Assange? What did he do?
Varios de los mismos insultos que profirió el Ecuador, inclusive manchando con heces de él las paredes de nuestro país.
Having kicked Julian Assange out of its embassy and revoked his asylum, the Ecuadorian government played on the media's appetite for the messy details, the dirty laundry.
Skateboarding in his underwear, secret meetings and scuffles with security guards.
We have to understand that the Ecuadorian government, which hosted, I can put it that way, Julian Assange at the embassy for many years, eventually turned away from him, and they needed a very good explanation as to why it did it. And as part of that explanation, they started spinning the media narrative by essentially leaking to the media these tiny details and bits of Assange's personal life, his hygiene, and many other factors.
I can't really blame the media for repeatedly using the film clip of Assange being dragged out of the embassy with his big gray beard looking like a very miserable, and failed prophet or something. And I can't blame them for, writing about how he treated his cats. That's the way the media operates. What does bother me is that they allowed the impression to spread that Assange was indicted for hacking. He was indicted for helping Chelsea Manning in general, and specifically for allegedly offering to possibly crack a password. That's not hacking.
Whether what Julian Assange did can be described as hacking or not depends on who is doing the describing. The headline in the Department of Justice's press release made its position clear. According to Assange's lawyer, though, what her client did was to try to protect his source. But the indictment specifies, does it not, that it was communications between Assange and Chelsea Manning, in which Assange is alleged to have helped Manning get the information out of the Defense Department computer system. If that's true, how problematic would that be for Assange's defense?
The point I think is important about the charges is that while the accusation is about conspiracy to commit computer crimes, or in the DOJ headline, hacking, if you look at the factual allegations, What it amounts to is a discussion about how Chelsea Manning could protect her identity while accessing material she already had access to.
Material Manning had already provided WikiLeaks, but Assange was looking for more, telling his source curious eyes never run dry. What happened next is central to this case. Manning had security concerns, fearing that if she went in for more, she would be traced. Assange suggested a different route into the system by cracking another password, thereby covering Manning's tracks. His lawyers say he was simply protecting his source. Others don't see it that way.
Journalists will often tell sources to, hide their, identity by using Signal to communicate, by using Tor to access various things in terms of an internet browser. But what journalists are not trained to do, what they don't do, is they don't help crack passwords. This is where Assange crossed the line that all other journalists wouldn't do. They wouldn't try to crack that password.
For those following the WikiLeaks story, there was an assumption that any case against Assange would fall under the Espionage Act, which criminalizes the acquisition and publication of classified documents. By that standard, all the other media outlets that published the leaked material could face the same legal consequences as Assange. But by basing its case on the hacking allegation rather than the dissemination of the documents, and by filing the charges under a different law, the prosecution can argue the charges against Assange carry no implications for other news outlets. Seems to me that what they're doing by using the act in question here, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, is that the DOJ is trying to distinguish Assange from other mainstream media journalists and organizations such as the New York Times and the Washington Post, who published the information Assange and WikiLeaks furnished them with. Is that how you see this?
That is absolutely what the DOJ is attempting to do, which is to distinguish between what Julian Assange is alleged to have done in terms of his communication with Chelsea Manning and his publishing activities, which cannot be distinguished in any way, shape or form from what the New York Times, The Guardian, Der Spiegel, El País, all of these media organisations did. But if you look at the factual allegations of what they've actually accused him of, those acts are the same acts that journalists engage in all the time.
Julian Assange's time in the public eye has been tumultuous. Back in 2010, when WikiLeaks made its trove of classified documents public, it came under attack in Washington, primarily from the American right.
Now, I'm willing to prosecute anybody that led to undermining the war effort.
And would that include going after WikiLeaks?
Yes, I mean...
Since then, opposition to WikiLeaks has grown to include voices on the left. Julian Assange lost many of them over material WikiLeaks made public prior to the 2016 election, revealing emails from inside the Hillary Clinton team that damaged her campaign to the apparent benefit of Donald Trump. By the following year, Ecuador was under new leadership. Rafael Correa, the president who granted Assange asylum, was replaced by Lenin Moreno, a more conservative figure who wanted better relations with Washington. There is also the shadow of the sexual assault allegations from Assange's time in Sweden a decade ago. That case is what led him into the Ecuadorian embassy in the first place. And while the investigation was dropped 2 years ago, it remains a key argument for those who wanted Assange out and into court. However, none of that is material to the DOJ's legal case. It was always built around the Manning leaks and the question of whether what Julian Assange did was an illegal form of political activism or, in fact, journalism that served the public interest.
The accusations that he is not a journalist because he does not serve the public interest, I find them quite ridiculous. It's just impossible for journalists critical of the mainstream consensus view to count as journalists on that definition. And having journalists with access to original documents, which then allow us to see how a lot of the narratives actually spun, I think it counts as important journalistic practice.
I have complete personal disgust for Julian Assange. I will never be a fan of his, But if they had charged him under the Espionage Act for the mere receipt and publication of the materials and nothing else, I would have had to have stood behind him, if only because I don't want the government ever being the one to decide you are a journalist who's entitled to First Amendment protection and you are not.
I'm less interested in the debate about who is a journalist and who isn't than I am in the question of, was this an act of journalism that is constitutionally protected? And there's no question in my mind that Assange was engaged in a very valuable act of journalism. Some of it is a bit strange. Some of it is arguably bad journalism. But what he's being indicted for was an act of journalism that was protected by the Constitution.
We're discussing other media stories that are on our radar this week with one of our producers, Johanna Hoos. Joe, there's a tasty little Julian Assange WikiLeaks angle in the release of the unredacted version of the Mueller report into the Trump administration and allegations of Russian collusion in the 2016 U.S. elections. We'll get to Assange in a minute, but first, walk us through the way the U.S. media have been covering this story.
Well, 3 weeks ago, when Trump's hand-picked Attorney General William Barr first released his 4-page summary of the 448-page report, the president insisted that he was pretty much cleared of any wrongdoing. So it looked like the media had some reckoning to do after a few years of relentlessly pushing the collusion story. But as it turns out, well, Barr's summary was selective at best, but misleading at worst, as the report is actually far more damaging to Trump than Barr initially led the public to believe, especially when it comes to the issue of obstruction of justice, which Mueller said Trump tried repeatedly. Now, it's worth remembering that back in 1974, during the Watergate investigation, obstruction of justice was actually enough to lead to President Richard Nixon's resignation. So the U.S. media are understandably all over the story.
Okay, now walk us through the Julian Assange angle in this.
Well, Mueller's report accuses the WikiLeaks founder of lying about the sources of those thousands of Democratic National Committee emails that his site published in 2016. The report provides some pretty compelling evidence that Assange, in trying to hide the identity of the Russian sources who gave him those leaked DNC emails, openly implied his source was Seth Rich, a DNC staffer who was murdered in Washington in 2016. Now, the Mueller report also provides evidence Assange was in touch with his contacts in Russia even after Rich's death. So he definitely has some explaining to do.
Okay, thanks, Joe. We're turning to Poland now, and the story of a Catholic priest and his radio station that lie at the heart of the country's politics. For nearly 30 years, Tadeusz Rydzyk has been preaching and broadcasting from the pulpit. His station, Radio Maria, does not attract particularly large audiences, and the content can be inflammatory. However, politically, Radio Maria punches far above its weight. Anyone running for office in Poland knows that, the current populist government included. Tadeusz Rydzyk is such a divisive figure. His mini-media empire is so polarizing that one journalist has written a stage play about this story. It opened a few weeks back, and much like Rydzyk himself, it's getting mixed reviews. The Listening Post's Flo Phillips now from Poland on the tangled web of politics, power, the priesthood, and the press.
December 2015, the 24th anniversary of Radio Maria.
Bez ciebie, ojcze dyrektorze, nie byłoby tego zwycięstwa.
December 2016, the 25th anniversary of Radio Maria.
I ja przybyłem tutaj dzisiaj jako prezydent Rzeczypospolitej, żeby podziękować.
December 2018, the 27th anniversary of Radio Maria.
Składam najlepsze życzenia za cały trud, za wszystko, co dla Polski, dla Boga zrobiliście Państwo przez te 27 lat.
The Prime Minister, the President, the leader of the ruling party, all paying their respects to one man, Father Tadeusz Rydzyk.
It is degrading that leaders, the Prime Minister, ministers of the Polish government, drive like crazy to the other side of Poland, all because it's what Father Rydzyk wishes. There they are, all holding hands, dancing and singing, celebrating Radio Maria's anniversary. It's unacceptable in the 21st century that one individual, a monk, can hold such power. It's incredible.
It's hard to overemphasize the role Tadeusz Rydzyk plays in Polish society. According to a recent survey, just 7% of Poles do not recognize his name. And that's in large part thanks to the media conglomerate he created. What started as a single radio station in the small medieval town of Torun, a 3-hour drive from the capital Warsaw, has since grown into an empire. Radio Maria was followed onto the airwaves by TV Trwam, a daily newspaper, Nasz Dziennik, a media college, a mobile network, as well as a publishing outfit, in part set up through his foundations, in part through his religious order, the Order of Redemptorists. When the station made its first broadcast in 1991, it found fertile ground. Coming just 2 years after the fall of the anti-clerical communist regime, for some, the Catholic Church served as a rallying point. For others, it was their saving grace.
For many people, Father Rydzyk offers a haven and creates a community. Among his listeners are a lot of elderly people looking to find their way in the modern world. Sometimes the speed of today's world terrifies them. Father Rydzyk gives simple answers to all their questions. Hallelujah, and let's move on. Radio Maria gives them a sense of security.
The main reason why he's so well known and so relevant is because he provokes very contradictory emotions. His theological program, which is also political, creates a sort of sect in the Polish church. If I'm a Radio Maria listener, I know straight away what my views are, whom I will vote for, who my enemy is.
There is a myth around Father Rydzyk's wealth that has been propagated for many years, even by public TV. Supposedly, he drives a luxurious car. Apparently, he was buying a helicopter. All of this gossip conjures up an image of a media mogul bathing in luxury. In reality, yes, Father Rydzyk is a media mogul because he owns a multimedia operation, but he is in fact a poor man. He lives in a cell.
Behind me is the heartland of Father Rydzyk's media empire. The sign here reads Witamy, which means welcome. Turns out if you're a journalist, not so much. We tried to talk to Father Rydzyk. All of our requests were rejected. According to his spokesman, Rydzyk rarely speaks to media other than his own outlets. And due to years of bad experiences with the media, neither he nor anyone associated with his organization was made available. As Rydzyk himself has said, if you want to learn about us, follow our media. We don't need to speak to others. That became evident when our producer tried to talk to parishioners leaving Rydzyk's sanctuary church.
Can we take it down for now?
This sort of hostility can also be seen and heard in Rydzyk's media.
Teraz przychodzi lewactwo i ono też zabija. Jeszcze mają media, mają wsparcie Zachodu, że do Unii Europejskiej czy innych organizacji.
Father Rydzyk's contempt towards the European Union is well known. I remember his statement in December 2018 that the European Union is actually the Soviet Union. He regularly makes comparisons between the two. In that same month, he also said the European Union is like a gas chamber.
There is a hit show on both Radio Maria and TV Trwam called Unfinished Conversations. The guests on the show are openly anti-Semitic, homophobic, xenophobic.
Powinniśmy przeciwstawiać się promocji zboczeń, dewiacji i wynaturzeń.
I had a priest on the show recently. He said that Satan possesses homosexuals and fights against us, meaning that homosexuals are on Satan's side. If someone is on Satan's side, it's natural to ask, what is their right to live?
I ten rozkład rodziny idzie, ta cała masoneria właśnie, Soros. To wszystko finansuje.
Father Rydzyk and the priests in his order do come across as having a disrespectful attitude when it comes to gay culture. But it's actually the listeners that are outraged. You get listeners calling in incensed by this so-called homo culture. And it's often the fathers that are then trying to tone down these statements.
Some of the output has sparked such controversy that journalist Martin Konchki has written a play about Radio Maria and the potentially dangerous impact it could be having on some of the station's most avid listeners, as well as on Polish society and culture more generally. Its title, Wróg się rodzi, is a play on words of a traditional Polish Christmas carol. God is born has become enemy is born.
Radio Maria's most important symbol for building an identity is searching for an enemy that can be blamed for all misfortune. Father Rydzyk is not just Radio Maria's leader, he's the face of the operation. Today you might even describe him as a trademark. He has become so powerful that no one in the Roman Catholic Church can reprimand him. No one can say, hey, stop, this is not evangelism. He is too strong.
One of the elements the play touches on is this close relationship between pulpit, patriotism, power and politics. In the past, Poland's elders within the Catholic Church did express their discomfort with Rydzyk's involvement in politics, though it did little to stop him. And when the Conservative Law and Justice Party returned to power in 2015, a new honeymoon period began.
Without Father Rydzyk's participation in helping to build a unified, strong electorate, an electorate who thinks just like him, thanks to the ideology he pushes on the airwaves, the kind of endorsement the leader of the Law and Justice Party received would not have been possible.
Jesteśmy bliżej tych ludzi, nawet tych ugrupowań politycznych, które są bliżej nauki Kościoła. To jest bardzo jasne.
In May 2018, Oko.press collected data on government spending, and it showed that since October 2015, Father Rydczyk's initiatives have received at least 80 million Polish zloty, $21 million, from various ministries and companies. It's a huge amount of money.
For his followers, this is money well spent. For his critics, Tadeusz Rydzyk is less priest, more businessman, profiting off his loyal audience and the politicians who crave his support. The very same politicians who go to great lengths to make life difficult for news outlets they don't like.
Niech będzie pochwalony Jezus Chrystus i Maryja zawsze dziewica.
The controversial king of the pulpit, proselytizing politics, not just prayer.
Finally, back to the Julian Assange WikiLeaks story. One media outfit that has come to Assange's defense is in the land of his birth, Australia. It's not the state-owned broadcaster, ABC, or any of the papers owned by the Murdoch clan. It's the Juice Media, a production company based in Sydney whose satirical material we have featured before. The Juice has a series it calls Honest Government Ads. This one looks at the collaboration of 4 governments in the Assange case: Australia, Ecuador, the US, and the UK. It was created and written by Giordano Nani. The language is, as they say, colorful. We did a lot of bleeping, but you'll figure it out. We'll see you next time here at The Listening Post.
Hello, I am from the British government with a fabulous announcement. No, I'm sorry, we still haven't sorted out this bleeding show. But we have finally managed to arrest our most wanted criminal. No, the other one, WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. Because we're America's yeah, baby.
Hola, I'm from the Ecuadorian government, and I'm here to confirm that our new president is America's too. ¿Será que nos pueden dar nuestro crédito el FMI ahora, por favor?
Since Mr. Assange is our citizen, we feel compelled to state in the strongest possible terms that we're America's too. We're grateful to all our for handing over Julian Assange, who is wanted on charges of making us look like war criminals, which of course we are. We have indicted the accused for the crime of helping his source to anonymously access documents in the public interest, otherwise known as good journalism. We ask all of you to cooperate with us in setting this dangerous precedent by focusing on how the accused is a bit of an instead of our attempt to destroy your press freedom. American Empire.